Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. And this is our very merry episode. My name is Fernando Arencibia, and I have to say that the only descriptor for the amazing woman that is by my side is the very cheerful and merry.
I look like Mrs. Claus. I didn't realize that twice.
We gotta put a picture up for people to know. But
Snapshot. Where's the camera here?
I love it. Don't worry, we got the video. Jennifer Woolman, say hi.
Hi. I was going to try to do a Mrs. Claus, but I don't know what
Oh
she
my
sounds
goodness. Nobody knows. Don't worry about it. You're good. Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, happy holidays to all of you guys, to all of our listeners. Thank you again for listening in, and Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Feliz Navidad, whatever it is that you celebrate. I hope you celebrate in the company of those that you love, and that you have a wonderful end of the year. And we are cheering with you with our little cafecito, since we always post at 3:05, which is the official cafecito time of Miami. We are cheering you on to have a very successful, a very prosperous, and most importantly, a very healthy 2026 and beyond. God bless you all.
Sip.
I love it. And by the way, that's the end of the episode, right? That's it?
Merry Christmas. Ciao. Happy holidays.
Yeah, a 5-minute podcast. I love it. Hey, that might actually be something. Anyhow, so Jennifer, one of the things that when we were discussing this was, a lot of what happens in the year, I find, and this is not like an amazing thing that I've discovered, but I think everybody feels it.
It's not Arencibia Intelligence.
No, it's not an Arencibia Intelligence special, but it is that, it feels like from Halloween on, all of these holidays just kind of get packed in, together. And then we have, Thanksgiving, and then we have Christmas. But something happens in Thanksgiving that is monumental, and it is incredibly impactful for the retail industry and the economy overall, which is what happens in Black Friday, and now with the extension of Cyber Monday, which, by the way, can we just agree that it is not Cyber Monday, it's Cyber Week? Because I get an email every day from my local guitar shop and from the national guitar shops that, oh, by the way, we've extended, guys, let's forego with the idea that, you didn't just get up on Tuesday and decide to extend the Cyber Monday sale, okay? We get it. We got a whole week. But I was doing a little bit of research about this because I think it's very important to what happens in retail. And I want to share with you some stats that I think would be significant. Black Friday, of course, kicks off the holiday shopping season, and it accounts for 25 to 40% of the annual retail revenue, depending on category, of course, in retail. So, for example, electronics, fashion, home goods, toys, and appliances see a disproportionate boost. So sometimes you see these stores, they're kind of empty. Why is the store open all year round? And some of those stores are going to make 40% of their annual revenue in this holiday season. That's how impactful it is. And even for categories that don't have this disproportionate effect, they still deal with this spillover traffic of having, a huge increase in the traffic that comes into these centers, whether it's cosmetics or luxury specialty, which really doesn't, have a lot of specials per se, but it still has that spillover effect of having that. And I was kind of putting it through the prism of how this would affect obviously the retail, but affect the economy overall, but then also how it affects the decisions that landlords and tenants make starting in the following year. And one of the things that I found is that obviously from a retailer perspective, what they do this time of year is, they basically move a lot of seasonal and a lot of aging inventory, right? So they get ready, they improve the liquidity. So now they go and they purchase more newer items that are going to be part of Q1 and Q2 and Q3, right? Now, for the economy overall, it is important that, when you have high retail sales, it does basically give you the feeling that consumers feel secure about their jobs. They feel secure about their savings and about their credit access. When you have weak sales, the households tighten their spending. So it's important from a brokerage perspective to really understand where the consumer is at. It also may signal, recessionary pressures. I mean, one of the things that I talk about with people all the time is when we talk about where inflation is and all that other stuff, they always tell me, yeah, but every time I drive by a shopping center, it's full, it's packed, it's, people are shopping, I see my neighbors with a bunch of boxes from Amazon, for example. And so those things are important, but they also affect other asset classes. So you have retail spending cascades down to warehousing and distribution, logistics and trucking, because now you're buying more stuff, manufacturing, seasonal labor, the payments and fintech. So, if you're in that sector, you see a huge upswing, this time of year. You get to know whether the consumer is using cash versus credit, how much they're using store financing and things like that. And so, I went a little bit further because I looked at Black Friday specifically, look at the effect on the economy overall, what it signals to that, but then how does that relate to commercial real estate? And I want to know if you, because you are more of a retail expert than I am, that Black Friday is almost like a live performance benchmark for landlords, investors, and brokers. So I want to give you these scenarios and I want you to opine. A strong year-end foot traffic correlates with higher rent sustainability, stronger renewal likelihood, lower default risk, right? And then you really get to know whether your anchor tenant pulls in its weight. Mm-hmm. In the opposite, then as a landlord, you might be getting ready to do more concessions, increase your TI, maybe some rent reduction, stuff like that, whereby, if you're doing great, you're probably going to have higher renewal terms, the CAM increases, you're going to push for maybe percentage rent, depends on the scenario. So, I mean, how significant do you think it is, for somebody like Beth Azor that we know? She is the retail queen, the canvassing queen, and, she owns her own retail centers. How much does that information really inform how her year is going to look like for the rent side?
Well, I think a lot. And she always wants to see the store sales, right? So for all of her tenants, that's part of the lease. And it makes sense from both sides, right? So if I own a shopping center and I'm the landlord and you come to me and it's lease renewal time and you say, hey, I'm hurting, the tariffs, the economy, whatever, well, show me your sales, right? I know what your sales were last year. If they're the same or have gone up, held steady or gone up, you don't have much of an argument for the rent decrease that you want. However, if you're a long-term tenant and I can see that you're struggling or that the economy was bad this year or that it didn't work, then maybe there's room. That opens the door for a discussion for sure.
No, and to your point, sometimes even if the margins are lower because you lower the price or because you're giving all these discounts, you're increasing the volume. So you make that strategic decision, right? And so at the end of the day, having the sales figures, will let you know that even if the margins were down, you still had a very successful year. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. And I do think that, owner operators like Beth or like Delee, those owner operators know and they have the flexibility to work with their tenants to really know what needs to be adjusted, either in terms of rental rates, TI, increasing or shrinking the footprint within their buildings, et cetera. So I think that's different than a shopping center REIT maybe
Right.
owned property, right?
Yeah.
Because they're more about the numbers, thinking about resale, whereas the independent owners, I think, are more about the community, the tenant, the helping the business, building the business, et cetera. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're still informed on the bottom line. It's just that they have a much more one-on-one relationship with their tenants, right? Like people like Beth and Delee, they know the people who are renting, they know who's renting, they know their stories, they know, everything,
So you and I often speak about the importance in retail to curate the retail center, and it has to do with obviously the decisions that you're making about who is going into those spaces. How much does this data inform, do you think, those operators on?
Well, I think it's changed, right? Because retail shopping centers aren't strictly retail anymore, right? They used to be retail and restaurant. Now they're curated. So you're going to have you might have a med spa, you might have more medical stuff, and they're not maybe doing as well at this time of year. Don't get me wrong. I think they are, because I think everyone's trying to hurry up and get all of their physicals and checkups and everything done before next year's deductible kicks in.
Yeah.
But it's not the same as like a retail sale. What fascinated me about this topic right around now for Christmas is obviously because, retail, Black Friday and everything else, and the experiences that we have when we're out shopping and eating and dining with friends and stuff, was what John Crossman of Crossmark said when we interviewed him not too long ago, which was about the tourism.
Right.
And how different it is if you own retail space in a tourist market, which obviously we do, right?
Yeah.
We're in a very tourist market. And he used the example, for those of you who haven't heard the episode, he said, look, if you have somebody coming and staying for a week at a hotel, they're not going to buy ketchup. But if you have somebody renting an Airbnb, they're going to buy ketchup, right? And so you're going to sell a lot more ketchup. You're going to sell a lot more stuff to the tourists during that time. I have a ton of family from Ecuador. When they first learned about Black Friday years ago, when we had them for our first Thanksgiving, that was the first time that they had heard of Black Friday. They have been coming to Miami for 20-something years now, specifically for Thanksgiving and Black, because obviously you don't celebrate Thanksgiving if you're not American, but they come for the Black Friday and the shopping, and they take all of their Christmas stuff back to Ecuador with them, right? So I thought that was really interesting, and so I wanted to kind of compare that with the research that was done by Visit Florida. So Visit Florida is our tourism promotional arm for Florida, and they do a lot of research. And last year, and I lost that quote, I'll get to it in a minute, we exceeded the number of visitors that we had in Visit Florida. It was like 140. Let me find it.
Right. You're saying from the year before that we year over year.
Correct.
We increased the number of visitors, which makes sense.
It showed we had the strongest year on record with it generated $133.6 billion in 2024. It was our highest year ever. So then, me and Data and you and Data, I went down the rabbit hole. So then I'm like, okay, I wonder what visitor estimates look like this year in 2025. And the interesting thing was that they break it down by domestic, overseas. Canada has its own category, and then for the total. So at first I looked at that, and so this is only for the first half of the year, we had 69 million domestic visitors, 4.4 million overseas visitors, not including Canada. And then Canada was down by 18.1%. We only had 1.69. But halfway through the year...
Does that mean they don't want to be the 51st state?
Yeah, I don't think they want to be the 51st
No, I don't
state.
think so either.
But after the first half of the year, we were already halfway above the halfway mark of where we were last year. Right. So I'm super curious to see how, and we're at that number with Canada down by 18%, right? So super curious to see how that's going to play out, over the last 2 quarters of the year. So the next report gets released in May of 2026. But my guess, and this is just a feeling based on what I'm seeing, and of course, Art Basel, we have to wait and see what the numbers for Art Basel, and, we're in the peak of our tourist and visitor season. No doubt. It'll be interesting to see if the global economy and the national economy, which people have kind of been questioning, right? Consumer spending, to your point, has been very high and strong, but credit card debts inching up, right? Sure. There are more layoffs, even though the job market is still pretty tight. The Fed hasn't decreased the interest because they're seeing that questionable, well, wait a minute, is inflation still going up, or are we getting too close to too much unemployment, right? So they're still trying to figure that out. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
No, and to your point, and we've made the point before, as we heard, Spencer Levy mention in conferences, talk about the fact that we're in the labor and demographics business, and the reality is that when the stores do well, that usually bodes well for jobs and wages and supply chain growth. When they don't, then you begin to see that there might be some issues down the pipe in the first and second quarter of the following year. So this is a time to be married. This is a time to be with families, a time that is very important for those connections. And we certainly wish you to have that experience, but it is also a very important time for all of the major indicators for how our economy is doing, and especially the consumer is doing. And, it is something that is always very interesting to monitor, follow up. And to your point, it would be interesting once they have the second half of the year stats to see where it is. And also, interestingly, how the first half of next year is going to be, especially with those Canadians. Are the Canadians going to come back? As a lot of the rhetoric has left, and, I think the Canadian Prime Minister has had some conversations about how this has been a positive thing in waking up Canada to realize that, you want to have other.
They need to diversify.
They need to diversify and all that stuff. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that whole thing grows. I find it so interesting, to your point about Beth asking for, to just see where the sales are year over year. And I know many, especially all institutional landlords do that. And I think it's very important. But I also think that it gives you the opportunity to look at the data and to really understand what is the effect of the foot traffic in your place, and also to make decisions as to, if there is a specific category in your shopping center that didn't do so well, is it because of the operator or is it because of the actual category? Those things become important. And I find it interesting because I remember one time having a client that was looking for a retail spot, and their landlord really didn't want, not that they didn't want them, but their landlord was, had done a traffic study and a parking study and said that we're going to have problems with this use because of the requirement. It was a restaurant, and because of the 3 to 1,000 requirement for parking, and we just don't have enough parking. But it was a huge center, but it had a lot of restaurants. And my client couldn't understand. My client felt like the landlord is, just now wanting to rent to me. And I said, well, it's not a decision that is made. And the client went by.
Right.
So, which then he realized, okay, maybe you're right. I said, well, look, landlords look at so many different things, including that, where the data is saying, is the category going to do well? Things like that.
Right. Landlords want their tenants to succeed.
Of course. Absolutely.
So,
yes, ma'am.
This is a short, sweet. We promised it at the beginning that it's going to be short and sweet, but I'm going to...
Please.
I'm going to do one of my things with you that hopefully I don't blow your mind. So do you know, and stick with me here, do you know where Rudolph the reindeer... Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, right? Holiday classic. We could make this a real estate... Ooh. This should have been my episode topic. So Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Okay.
That book was invented as a marketing book for Montgomery Ward in 1939. Now, most of you probably who are listening have no idea what Montgomery Ward is because they closed all their stores in 2001, I think. But so
they did it just to bring people into the store. I had no idea. And it's become its own thing.
Yeah, it's a standalone.
It's a standalone
movie.
But they created the song and everything. That's super interesting. Wow. That's awesome.
There
Okay,
you
that's
go.
good to
There's
know.
your fun
And
fact.
you would say Montgomery Ward is like Macy's. It was like a Nordstrom. Like, you know, it's a huge, probably bigger than what they are today, right? Because they
Well, they don't exist today, but they're
Well, I know.
They're an online retailer.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
So
an
now
interesting
you know
stat. And now you
where
know.
I came from.
The more you know.
The more you know. There you go.
Wow.
Okay, everybody, from Between Two Chairs, we wish you a super happy holiday season, a Merry Christmas, and please don't go out there and help the economy too much. Spend time with your friends and family. Enjoy nature, especially if you're in South Florida. This is our favorite time of year to be in Florida. The weather's amazing and beautiful, and go out and enjoy our restaurants.
If you could do that while helping the economy,
exactly.
it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, well, at least our small businesses, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
That is definitely a great
Yeah.
message. Support your local businesses. You know, they really are the lifeblood of your community. They deserve that support. So, they, you know, wherever you can, please support your local businesses.
With friends and family.
With friends and family. There you go. God bless you
See
guys.
you next year.
Bye-bye.